may notice here is that in this report, if you've run any history reports with Mastermind, you know that oftentimes you start out with a long list of fields here in the page area that sort of push the display area way down the page. So that can be a little bit confusing for people sometimes. And the reason that didn't happen now, and the reason we have a new toolbar here is because of the new version, of course, but there is a setting now under Preferences, and I'm going to relate that from here. This is the dialog, of course, we created the report from. I'm going to open up Preferences and go to our settings over here. We have a few new setting options up here. One of them is hide page fields that are set to all. That's the top one. So, in other words, page fields are the fields at the top of here. These are called the page area of the pivot table. And if they are set to all, they would be moved off. Now, there are two fields that are not set that way, and the reason is that the create on field was actually grouped automatically. So after it was moved off, it was actually moved on by the setting that said take the create on field and group it into years and months and quarters so that this report would have a little more meaning at the startup stage. So aside from that, any field that was in here that was set to all was moved off to the hidden area. Now, can anybody tell me where fields are that are in the report but are hidden from the user's view?
Don't you have to click on the table itself and then they show up?
If you click on the table, that doesn't make the list show up necessarily because that is actually another option in the setups. Hide the fields list as the report is opening. So I actually have that preference turned on. The field list that we're talking about is this one, which toggles on and off using the rightmost icon on the pivot table toolbar. It also toggles on and off using the bottom item here on the short menu. So by default, for most people, this is actually turned on. I set the preference for it to be turned off mainly just because it's another element on the screen, and what we've really been concentrating here on is simplifying the screen, making it so that you don't have too many floating objects out here that just sort of can boggle the mind of a simpler user, of a less well-educated user, let's say. We wanted to give you the option of actually hiding that stuff. So for your share users that might be intimidated by having a toolbar up here and a field list here and a pivot table over here, we actually made preferences that hide the field list when the report is open. It also docks the toolbar after it's created. So you can see that our toolbar here, by default, it actually showed up here. I've just dragged it down since then. This is the new Mastermind toolbar. And so rather than have it floating out in the middle of the screen, we've now given you the option of having it just dock automatically. We had it floating out here mainly so that people would just know that there was one, but hopefully they get used to that and then eventually turn on that preference that just has it show up docked. The field list, by the way, if you're not familiar, dragging a field in is just as easy from there to here as it is dragging it within the pivot table itself. Pulling those in, dragging them out, however that needs to be. So this is just a repository of your fields that are available to you. So dragging them in and out is pretty easy. In Office 2007, this field list is actually an expanded thing, and it takes up even more of the real estate on your screen. So we have tended to want to simplify things by just hiding it by default if the user chooses to do that. And the preferences, I think I covered the ones that I wanted to. Hide page fields set to all. You also have the option of hiding ones that have no valid items. Sometimes your reports include fields that actually have no items in them. They're just empty fields. And so rather than have those show up, we just have them automatically also be hidden. And when we say hide, we basically just mean put them in here, leave them in here without having them displayed. Turning off subtotals is one of the other things that's been asked for a lot. In this report, that won't have much meaning here just yet, but what that refers to is, let's say we're creating a line listing report here where we're going to include the company name, and let's pull in the activity codes for each one and the activity types and the amounts, if there are amounts here on the sales. You can sort of see where I'm going with this. As I pull in each one, you see that the subtotaling is not automatically turned on, so it's very quick to move these in here and not have subtotals show up. And that's because in one of our preferences, we now have the ability to turn off subtotaling for all fields so that you're able to just pull in fields at will and not have that subtotaling show up. Now, if you want to have subtotals, of course, you you always have the possibility of turning on the subtotaling for any given field. So if I go here and just turn that on, now I've got subtotaling just at the company level, but for each individual within company, they're no longer subtotal.
So for the preference page, when you first install Mastermind, what is the